Welcome back to Facing the Future. I'm your host, Bob Bixby. And for this segment, I'm joined by Concord Coalition Chief Economist Steve Robinson, who's written a new issue brief on the Biden administration's latest student loan initiative, in which he poses the question whether loans are being turned into grants. Steve, what's the kind of the sum and substance of the new proposal, which I would frame it as sort of part two of the proposal that was originally announced this year?
Yeah, so as you recall, the last fall, the Biden administration announced that it was going to write off between $10,000 and $20,000 of student loan per student. And that was announced back in the fall. That's been challenged in the courts and is currently being under review at the Supreme Court. They're supposed to do hearings in February. But as part of the announcement of that debt forgiveness proposal, the administration also announced that the Department of Education would be issuing new regulations. And those regulations came out back at the beginning of this month in January. And essentially what those regulations say is they're going to create a new income-related repayment plan. And there are several income-related repayment plans in current law. Actually, some of it's in law, some of it's in regulation. And essentially what they're doing is they're taking an existing plan and modifying that and calling that sort of this new repayment plan. And essentially what it does is it allows students to, instead of paying, the normal student loan is a 10-year fixed payment. So you borrow money to go to college, you graduate, and you start paying it back. And your monthly payments are a fixed amount, and you repay the loan over 10 years. What the income-related plans do is they say, instead of paying a fixed amount over 10 years, you pay a portion of your income over 20 years, 20 years for an undergraduate loan and 25 for graduate loans. And essentially, currently, the plan is you pay 10% of your income to the extent that your income exceeds 150% of the poverty level. And the poverty level for an individual is about $15,000. So, 150% of that or 200% of that. So what the new proposal says is that instead of paying 10% in excess of 150% of poverty, you only pay 5% of your income in excess of 225% of poverty. And so that would be roughly about $33,000. So if you're an individual and you make under $33,000, you wouldn't have to make any payment on your loan. To the extent that your income is above $33,000, you would pay 5% of your income of the amount above the $33,000. So to sort of put this in perspective, the old program, if you went to college for 4 years, you borrowed as an independent student. So you're a dependent of your parent. So you're 18, 19 years old, you're still claimed as a dependent by your parents on your tax return. You could take out a maximum of $27,000 in loans over 4 years. And under the current income, the 10%, 150% ratios, you would pay about 80 cents on the dollar in present value if you were sort of in that income range of 150 to about 300% of poverty. The new proposal, because it expands the income threshold and lowers the payment, you would pay about 60 cents on the dollar. So out of that $27,000 that you borrowed, a present value of the loan, the amount that you would repay for every dollar you borrowed, you pay back about 60 cents. Whereas under current law, for every dollar you borrowed, you pay back about 80 cents. So it's a substantially larger subsidy, but moreover, not only is the subsidy larger, but the universe of students who are eligible. In other words, the current proposal, because it roughly phases out at about 300% of poverty, about a third of students fall in that income range. Whereas at 225% of poverty, the subsidies phase out closer to 500% of poverty. And that's almost half of the people. So in other words, if you look at census data, how many people go to college and get an associate's degree, 2-year degree, or a bachelor's 4-year degree, that population of students, almost half of them would be eligible for subsidies. Almost a quarter of them would be eligible for a zero payment because they fall below the 225% of poverty. So this is a huge increase in the subsidy and a huge increase in the number of students who would be eligible to receive the subsidy.